How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host on the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing well. Happy Thanksgiving week, Jack. Happy to be
Yeah, you too.
celebrating the holidays up here, man. Don't know if you're sticking around or traveling. I'm just going to be sticking around here in Santa Barbara, where I'm from. Not going to have a lot of family in town or anything, so it should be smaller and quieter for me. But looking forward to it. Have a couple of days off and just enjoying spending time with folks.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we're not going anywhere either. It is actually this will be the first Thanksgiving in 5 years. Wait, let's see, 4 years that no, I guess this would be the fifth year. So the first Thanksgiving in 5 years that I'm actually spending with my side of the family, because 2020 was the last Thanksgiving I spent with my family, because of my now wife at the time girlfriend, living in Vermont, which was much closer to where we went to college. It was easier for us to take that short little weekend to her family instead. So I'm really excited. One of the big perks of getting to move back here, to Pennsylvania, to where I grew up, is being able to be with my family on Thursday. So I'm really looking forward to that. Looking forward to some good football this weekend, both college and pros. We're going to be doing a big college episode, a double episode week next week, where we're going to really talk about, um, break down a lot of stuff related to rivalry week and going into conference championships. I guess I will say one thing. I will respectfully and willingly rescind all of my opinions about Notre Dame being above Miami, considering Miami beat Syracuse 38-10 earlier this year, and Notre Dame beat Syracuse 70-7 on Saturday. So that's all that needs to be said about that. We don't need to go any further with that. But regardless, big college football episode going to happen next week, as well as our normal, regularly scheduled NFL eps. But today, we have to react to week 12, and what we saw of week 12 this week and going into week 13. So let's get right into it. Nick, who is a team that impressed you this week?
Uh, Impressing me is a very specific emotion that it brings out in me. This team was impressive in one way, but very much wrenching my heart and stressing me out in another. And it wasn't my Pittsburgh Steelers, to be clear. That would be the New York Giants making me worry, making me sweat playing against your Detroit Lions, man. The New York Giants with Jackson Dart were a fun, interesting team, and then things melted down and Dart got hurt. The New York Giants with Jameis Winston are another fun team that is trying to win these games and trying to ruin my prediction that the Giants are not going to win a game for the rest of the year. I would love and appreciate it if Jackson Dart could get healthy and could play and send Jameis Winston back to the bench. And that would make me feel a lot better because Jameis Winston, I think both players can win games, but Jameis Winston puts a lot of stress on the other team that is undue stress against this Giants team that literally can't make the playoffs at this point and looks to be
Yeah.
the second worst team in the league, I think. Like them and the Titans, it's vaguely close. I think the Titans and Raiders probably are the only teams I would say would be worse, actually. But this Giants team, I think, is very impressive. I think Jameis is slinging it. Wandale Robinson's looked incredible and put up some crazy stat lines the last
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks. I think their defensive front, Brian Burns being second in the league in sacks, really impressive for a defensive front that's stacked with talent. I think that this team's just got a bunch of talent and going forward should be really interesting for the next couple years. I really hope that they're going to be able to solidify the offensive line and offensive front. And I think that they're going to actually hopefully be able to be a good team going forward with hopefully a more established coach after this season that'll be able to build upon it. But right now, they are a team that is stressing me out and being impressive doing it, making me worry the last 2 weeks here, Jack.
Yeah, the Giants, man, we got the fullest of full Jameis Winston experience on on Sunday. We had Jameis Winston throw a 60-yard bomb on a flea flicker. We
Mhm.
had Jameis Winston have a receiving touchdown. We
Mhm.
had Jameis Winston throw one of the classic Jameis interceptions that is just like, what is happening? And we also had Jameis get sacked on a fourth down on the opposing side of the field when they needed it most there in overtime. I mean, it was truly the fullest of Jameis Winston experiences. Um, in as crazy as this sounds, though I don't think it sounds as crazy as you wanting the Pittsburgh Steelers to get Mason Rudolph and Will Levis last offseason. I don't think it's that crazy. I want the Giants to sign or the Lions to sign Jameis Winston this
Oh.
offseason. I mean, the imagine the culture of the Lions locker room already, and then you add
Mhm.
Jameis Winston to that, it would be absolutely
Mhm.
electric. But no, the Giants, the thing is, they have pieces. They have
Mhm.
pieces.
For
I
sure.
still believe that Dayball getting fired because Joe Shane wouldn't put like actually good, like significant talent on his roster for him to coach. I do still believe that. Like I'm not backing down on that. But the Giants do have pieces. Um and so I am really intrigued to see what happens with them.
Mhm.
I really like their defense. I like the guys they have on their defense. It just really comes down to that offensive line. That offensive line is really really bad. It got the job done for most of the game on Sunday, but yeah, I agree with you that the Giants were impressive. I think you can say both the Giants impressed and the Lions depressed on on Sunday. But that's why they play the games, right? And that's the great thing about the NFL. Any given Sunday, anybody can do anything. So yeah, so that's a great pick there, the New York Giants and Jameis Winston. I'm gonna go with the Houston Texans. Um, the when we recorded last week, it was after the Texans Bills game, and so and I mentioned it briefly and mentioned how good Houston's defense is. But like seriously, Houston is has put together quite a resurgence here over the last month and a half or so. They look really really solid. The defense looks really really good. Um, Josh Allen went from being responsible for 6 touchdowns on what would that have been, Sunday the 16th against
Mhm.
Tampa Bay, to 0 touchdowns responsible for on Thursday night. Um, and they just play really, really good football. And I think every single team in the AFC is really, really concerned if they find a way to get in, because what they do really well by playing defense travels really, really well. Um, and so I'm very, very impressed with the Houston Texans after this week. They looked really, really solid, looked really well put together, looked like, they're getting things in order and getting them in order at the right time. I think they had 8 sacks
Mhm.
on Thursday night, which is just crazy. Like the Bills' offensive line, they are not pushovers. They're not the best offensive line in the NFL by any means, but you know, 8 sacks is just
Mhm.
crazy. So for them to do that was really really impressive. They forced Josh Allen to throw 2 picks. They forced a fumble on Khalil Shakir in that game. They just they and on offense they did what they had to do. They did just enough. I mean, Davis Mills was 16 of 30 for 153 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns and he didn't turn the ball over, and he wasn't sacked at all. He wasn't sacked at all. That's been the whole thing about Houston. Also, is their offensive line being, they can't protect C.J. Stroud. Well, if the offensive line was able to protect Davis Mills, hopefully that gives both the Texans coaching staff and C.J. Stroud some hope when he comes back that they're going to be able to keep him upright. Um, It's just they're rounding into form. Like I said, they're rounding into form at a good time. Their last, let's say, last 6 games, eight, seven, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, 8 games. We'll say their last 8 games. Their last 8 games, 26-0 win over the Titans, 44-10 win over the Ravens, 27-19 loss to the Seahawks. Seahawks a very good team, close game. 26-15 win over the 49ers. 18-15 loss to the Broncos. Again, that's a team that like hasn't lost in like 3 months of basically. 36-29 win over the Jaguars, 16-13 win over the Titans, 23-19 win over the Bills. They just keep finding a way. Not all of those wins are impressive, especially the numbers and the offensive output, but they keep winning them. And we're at that time of year that it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter how it happens. You need to win. Like it's the reason that, like, yes, I have some concerns about the Lions based on their performance, but I'm not as concerned because they won. Because a loss at this point of the year is very, very hard to dig yourself out of. And so if you're winning games, whatever it takes, any means necessary. And Houston's just done a really, really good job of that.
Yeah, great pick. I think Houston, they've been impressive lately. I think that defense, you have to give so much credit. D'Amico Ryan's coaching that defense, man. I don't think there's I think there's maybe one other team in the entire league that their defense has that much weight that's put on their shoulders, that being the Browns, man. Both of these defenses just burden such a heavy load from their teams where, man, these Texans teams, like, they can get into rock fights and like their offense can score 13 points and their defense might allow 10. They might allow
Yeah.
6. Like these defenses can play against some great offenses like a Josh Allen and can just hold them down. And you got to give D'Amico Ryans a bunch of credit there. If I'm the Texans, I think you just have to pour all your resources into O-line and running game. I think if you got like a superstar running back in there that you could be really like interesting if you build up that O-line. I just think that like it's an old adage and it's what you hear from a lot of old school coaches, but defense and running game. That like if you have a great defense and a great running game, you can win so many games in this league. The Lions right now, their passing game is spotty and up and down at times. And with Laporta out, it's not as good, obviously. But their defense has played way above where I think some people thought it would play, given the amount of injuries last year into this year. Their defensive coordinator's been able to just put a lot of respect on that side of the ball and been very tough.
Yeah.
And then Jahmyr Gibbs has been incredible. And I think that teams that build like that, where you have stout defense and you have a running game, is going to generate a lot of wins in this league, even if your quarterback play isn't elite that given week, even if your receiving talent isn't amazing. And the Lions obviously are good in both of those areas. But a team like the Texans, where their offensive line and running game's really not good, and their defense is able to burden that heavy of a load, it's very, very impressive, like you're saying, even with a backup quarterback. Davis Mills is a really good backup in this league, man. He's very good at his job.
Yeah. Speaking of the Lions and their running game and the Texans needing a running game, I want to make, this is not like our bold prediction, but I want to make a bold prediction. And that is that the Lions trade David Montgomery this offseason. And I think Houston would be a team that should be interested in him because he is, he's not in that rookie contract anymore. He's past that. He is a little bit older. I mean, he still has the juice, don't get me wrong, but it's been really, really clear this year that Jahmyr Gibbs is the top back on that roster. It's not this 1A, 1B thing. It is no 1 and 2. And you're paying David Montgomery a lot of money to be your number 2, especially with how good Jahmyr Gibbs has been, especially with how, I mean, I don't want to say easy, but how easy it is to, say trade David Montgomery to the Texans for a 4th round pick and then use that 4th round pick on a running back or 5th round pick, and use that pick on a running back, get a guy that can slot right in there, and do that. So something that, as a Lions fan, it would make me really, really sad, but also I would not be mad at Brad Holmes for doing it because I think it would make sense at this point. But talking about the Texans needing running back, David Montgomery might be the guy. So,
Yeah,
um,
they've done that before. Jamal Williams was a really good running back for this Lions team, and then they replaced him with Montgomery, who's done a lot of other good things for this Lions team. Both of
mhm.
them were tremendous in their role. And I think you could definitely take a half step down and get a bit younger and a bit cheaper with somebody like a Damian Pierce, who the Chiefs just picked up because the Texans cut him and he's had some injury issues. But I think a sledgehammer kind of player like you're talking about, a Najee Harris, a Damian Pierce, somebody that can just be the sledgehammer to go with the speed back, I think
Hmm.
definitely a great compliment like that. But definitely a 1 and a 2 right now, not a 1A, 1B, not in that offense, no.
Right, right. So, all right, Nick, what is a team that that you are concerned about? You are not impressed and overall concerned with their performance this last week.
That would be a team that I have been pretty consistently concerned about in the Philadelphia Eagles. They are very concerning because I hold them to a high standard, being the reigning Super Bowl champions, being a team that is so talented as they are, with a loaded defense, with an incredible receiving core, with a really talented offensive line, with a quarterback that's paid really well, with a running back that last year just had an unbelievable season. And Philadelphia, when they played Dallas this week, they scored 21 points in the first half. Incredible. They were up 21-0. Then Dallas scored a late touchdown in the first half, cutting it to 21-7. Still, you have a 14-point lead. Jalen Hurts has been throwing the ball all over the place, just cutting up a Dallas defense. Deron Bland has been getting burnt all day. He's been having a bad season, too, for Dallas, man. Deron Bland has not been living up to the contract extension that they gave him. But man, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith were looking great in the first half. Just incredible game by both of them. And then the second half, their offense just turned off. Saquon Barkley, really inefficient day running. He's been living as a really inefficient running back basically all season. He's been averaging under 4 yards a carry in the mid threes, which a lot of running backs are actually averaging mid threes this season. But Saquon's been super inefficient. The running game, sum total, any other running backs they put in there have looked okay, but not being able to generate volume running plays and being able to put up like quality running performances as a team has been really disappointing. And I think that just this Eagles team, because of how I look at them, I feel like there's a track record of there can be issues that stem deeper than just the talent and the production on the field. Where AJ Brown, it's great one week, it's bad the next week. It's issues in the locker room one week, it's saying something to the media the next week, it's having internal meetings one week. Like, it's always something with this team. 3 years ago, they went to the Super Bowl, lost it to the Chiefs, and we were like, oh my God, this team's incredible. They're so stacked. Man, they're so good. Then the next year, they fall apart, lose to Tampa Bay. They were on an incredible win streak. They were like 10-2 or something like that. And then fell apart, lost to Tampa Bay in the wild card. And then the next year, they add Saquon Barkley and become an incredible team again last year when they won the Super Bowl. But the thing is, there were tenuous moments last season where losing early in the season to the Packers, I believe, in Brazil in week 1. Like, there were tenuous moments, I believe, with that team. And then they were able to figure it out. The running game was incredible. And the passing game actually last year was about the same as it is this year. They're actually passing it a little more effectively. But because of how incredible the running game was, we thought, man, this team's really good, even though their record this season's really good again, just like last season. I think we're looking at this team and being like, wow, they're not as good because their running game that drove that team, that made that team look as good as they did, as talented as they were, just has been falling off a cliff this year. This year, they are number 10 in rushing attempts and 27th in yards per rush. 27th. They are just outside the bottom 5 in yards per rush, with a team with Saquon Barkley, Tank Bigsby, A.J. Dillon, Jalen Hurts, who's great at running the ball. And man, just the production to match has not been there for this Eagles team. And for a team that's really, really talented on defense, you just get a second half where George Pickens has been dominating you all day. CeeDee Lamb has been really effective all day, but just dropping balls because CeeDee Lamb's been having a weird season like that. But man, a team that has a vaunted defense that's been playing really well and went up 21-0 when you think the pass rush can pin its ears back and just be zoning in on Dak Prescott and just ripping into him. I don't remember seeing Dak Prescott face a ton of pressure, like have big issues with the defense in the second half of this game. With the defense that's that loaded, when you're having to drop back and throw it deep, Dak threw it deep pretty damn well yesterday and took some shots and was really good against the defense that I hold to a high standard. I'm still concerned about their cornerback 2 spot. If you have DeJean in the slot and then you have Mitchell as the outside corner, that opposite corner that you had, homie from the Titans
Dory
was,
Jackson.
Dory Jackson. He was not having a great game either. But man, I'm just really concerned about what this Eagles team can turn into in the playoffs, especially considering their track record of melting down. They're still breaking in a new offensive coordinator this year when they've had offensive coordinator issues in the past. When they had Shane Steichen get hired away by the Colts, they had issues after that, and then they hired Kellen Moore, and he stabilized it. And now they're having issues again this year with it not being stable, and Nick Sirianni is not that offensive coordinator. I'm worried about this Eagles team, even though they're in a good spot. Losing a game with this big a lead to a team that you should have won that game against, having special teams issues, having a missed field goal and a muffed punt. I just think that they're not as good as everything shows they should be. And so they're disappointing to me.
Yeah, and hey, don't call that a muffed punt. That was a forced fumble.
You're right.
That was a forced fumble by Syracuse's own Elijah Clark.
You're right. And Elijah Clark getting shoved down multiple times.
Yeah, blocked in the back,
illegal blocks in the back too.
All
of that. You're right.
Yeah. The thing about the Eagles that gives me pause from just being like, yep, this is 2023 Eagles all over again, is their remaining schedule. They play the Raiders and they play the Commanders 2 times. And so, I mean, we would need to talk about, like, literally the building gets set on fire for them to, like, have that sort of fall off, like they had that year. But still, I totally agree with you. There's reason to have concern there. Team that concerned me this week, and I'm willing to say it despite them winning, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. You get Brock Purdy back for the first time in a while, and it's like, well, he needs to get his legs under him, sure, but like 3 first-half picks, that's more than just, oh, he needs to get his legs back under him type performance. On top of that, they were very reliant on Christian McCaffrey, which always makes me nervous for this San Francisco 49ers because of how injury prone he is. You cannot guarantee 31 touches and 140 yards for him every week. I think that even though San Francisco is 8-4, and that puts them currently 1.5 games back of the Rams. Only 1.5 games back of the Rams. I am concerned that, like, they're clearly the third best team in that in that division. And frankly, it's not close. And so when you have a performance like this, and granted, give the Carolina Panthers some credit, they are a pesky team. And with the potential, depending on how bad this injury is for Baker Mayfield, as crazy as this sounds, I can see a world where Carolina crawls back into this thing and sneaks into the playoffs because they play Tampa Bay 2 times. But still, if you are trying to convince us that you are a Super Bowl contender, you cannot beat Carolina at home 20-9. You just can't do that. The offense did not look great. The defense looked okay. Like, it didn't look amazing. It didn't look terrible. It got the job done. They held Carolina to under 250 total yards. They had 2 turnovers. But still, Like, yeah, I don't know. It gives me pause. Um, because of the way that San Francisco has looked in the past, including just earlier this year, and also how they have uh, historically had this weird what's happening as we get into the playoffs under Mike Shanahan that um, granted we might experience the first year ever as Mike Shanahan is the head coach of the 49ers that they make the playoffs and don't make the NFC Championship game. That's very easily on the table. Just as easily on the table though because of how loaded the NFC is the San Francisco 49ers team not making the playoffs. Right now they're currently the 7 seed at 8-4. You have Detroit right behind them at 7-4. San Francisco doesn't necessarily have an easy remaining schedule. It's not super hard, but currently, they play three teams that are in playoff position in their remaining 5 games. Like I don't know that 10-7 gets you into the playoffs in the NFC as a wild card this year because of how strong the NFC is. Um, so I'm concerned for the 49ers. They absolutely can turn it around. This game may very well have just been, you know, Brock Purdy's coming back from injury and he'll be set and good moving forward. But if not, it's concerning.
Mhm. For you, you're obviously a Lions fan, and the Lions are trying to jump the 49ers here. Would you say that it's more, if you were to put a bet on Kyle Shanahan's 49ers, do you think it's more likely that they make it to the NFC Championship or drop out of the playoffs? With the schedule remaining, they play the Browns and the Titans, man.
Yeah, but then they go Colts, Bears, Seahawks, their last 3 games.
Yeah, they do.
So here's the weird thing. Here's the weird conundrum this puts me in. I want the 49ers to beat the Bears because the Lions can still absolutely. You predicted it last week that they're going to win the division.
Mhm.
And they'll need, they will have one opportunity. Okay, technically, the Bears can win all of their remaining games except the last week against the Lions if the Lions win out because then they'd have the same record, but the Lions have beaten them 2 times. So, but regardless, um, I do think that it's more likely the 49ers miss the playoffs
Mhm.
um, because of that remaining schedule, and because I don't know that 10-7 is good enough in the NFC. Um, in the AFC, 10-7 would be good enough, but in the NFC, you already have, you know, like a 7-4 team in the Lions that are on the outside looking in currently. Um, you have San Francisco at 8-4 and the 7, Green Bay at 7-3-1, Seattle at 8-3. Like I don't know that 10-7 in the end will be able to get the job done. Which would be wild, by the way. That a 10-7 record is not good enough to get you in the playoffs would just be crazy.
Mhm.
Um, but that said, like I do think that that is a possibility. And what's interesting is if you just backing up and looking at the NFC playoff picture compared to the AFC playoff picture, in the AFC right now, there are 6 teams that are reasonably in the competition for the 3 wild card spots. In the
Mhm.
NFC, there are 4 teams that are reasonably in the conversation for the 3 wildcard spots. Because after
Mhm.
Detroit, it's Carolina at 6-6, who do still have a shot to get in, but it would be from overtaking Tampa Bay. I think not getting playing their
Probably.
way into a wild card. Everyone wants to talk about Dallas, and I do think if Dallas wins this week, they would be like this in a couple days on Thursday against the Chiefs. They would be in a place that they would be playing well enough that you'd be like, oh, maybe this would be a playoff team. But like we talked about with the Eagles' remaining schedule and with how fierce the competition is for the 3 wildcard spots between the 4 teams already talked about. I think they dug themselves too big of a hole. Um, but I think a lot of teams, especially if they beat the Chiefs this week, are going to be like really hoping that the craziness doesn't happen that gets the Cowboys in. Um,
Mhm.
but that's getting too far off of what you asked, which is, do you think it's more likely the Niners miss the playoffs or make the NFC Championship game? And I'm going to say miss the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty clear too. They're the 7 seed right now, and the Lions are good. Like the Lions could just overtake the 49ers anyway, and then they're screwed. So
Yeah.
I think
The
it's pretty clear. Yeah.
the one thing that San Francisco does have going for them, when it comes to, we get to same record tiebreakers, they are 8-2 in the NFC right now. They've only played two games against the AFC. They have three remaining, which is odd that the schedule is kind of backloaded in that way. You typically don't see that. Um, but they have a very very good in conference record, which could be the deciding factor. We'll have to see. So, all right, Nick, what is a game that you are interested in going into this week? A game or two. Well, if you've got two,
Mhm.
that works too.
I think there are actually a bunch of good games on this slate. I think that Chiefs Cowboys is going to be really fun on Thanksgiving, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just looking at, can the Chiefs keep this high pressure situation that is them needing to win all these games up? And they're going into Dallas where the pressure is always high. They're always nationally televised games. It's on Thanksgiving. You're going to have every single Dallas fan there just packed in that stadium because the Chiefs are coming to town and the Chiefs never come to Dallas. I just think that situation where Dallas is fighting with momentum now, trying to win out here and trying to make the playoffs, and this Chiefs team back against the wall can't be losing basically any more games.
Right.
Maybe they can lose one, but not two here with the Chiefs. So I'm just really, really curious what sort of urgency we see from these two teams. That
Yeah.
the Chiefs have been underachievers this year. The Cowboys, I think, have been overachievers this year with Schottenheimer, who neither you or I thought was a great head coaching candidate, with a team where we thought the defense was terrible, and the defense did look terrible, but they're turning it around. I think that this Dallas team, are they able to keep their momentum, and are the Chiefs able to stave off the negative downhill kind of slope that's been hitting that team? So I'm just curious about this mesh point in the season for both of these teams that are on different trajectories, it feels like.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good one. We talked about, like, I don't think that the Cowboys have time. I think they have time. I don't think they have losses from the teams that they need to beat in front of them, to be able to catch up, in the playoff picture. Because, already talking about where the wild card situation is at, and then on top of that, the Cowboys needing losses from the Eagles that, despite how concerning they look right now, they play the Raiders once and the Commanders twice. Like, it's hard to look at that and see them, you know, even if they lose the other three games that they have remaining, those are likely wins, and I don't think that the Cowboys will be able to do enough to surpass that. They would need to win out. They would literally need to win out, and they would need the Eagles to lose their remaining games except those three, to do it. Which, again, it's not mathematically impossible, but um, unlikely for sure. Which actually, if you think about it, means that if the Eagles win this week, they clinch the division, right?
I think so. And they got a Bears team now that has their own momentum, that hasn't been losing games, that's for sure. They've been winning these close games.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe this
No,
could be the
no,
start of
hold
the
on,
Eagles'
hold
mountain.
on. No, that won't be true. That won't be true. We're thinking,
Maybe two
I,
weeks from now if they get two more
right, right,
wins.
yeah, 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 yeah. If you chalk those other three games up as wins, then yes, they win this week against
Or
the
if they
Bears, they
would have
clinch
just
the
beat
division.
Dallas, if they had just beat Dallas and clinched the tiebreaker, then this would have been a wrap on the division
Right, right.
because
So
the
anyway,
other teams are melting down. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what game are you looking forward to this week, Jack?
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I am looking forward to Houston and Indianapolis.
Mm,
That game is happening this week. Indianapolis kind of on a little bit of a backslide lately. They just lost to the Chiefs this last week. Before that, they beat the Falcons in Berlin in overtime. They lost to the Steelers a week before that. And this, if you are the Chiefs, you are rooting for the Texans. I know that sounds crazy considering the Texans are your direct competition for the wild card, but what you want if you're the Chiefs is you want Houston to overtake Indianapolis because you've got that tiebreaker over Indianapolis. That's the way that's how I feel at this situation. Again, you and I were talking or texting earlier this week, about the Chiefs situation.
Mhm.
Um, I'll just sort of summarize what I had said to you about it briefly. I said I think they win three more games: Chargers, Titans, Raiders. However, 9 wins isn't going to cut it in the AFC. If you look at Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Houston, and Buffalo's remaining schedules, they all have at least 3 wins in the next 6 weeks. Plus, they have a really bad record in conference, meaning the Chiefs. Um, Compared to these other teams above them. That combined with losses to a lot of teams above them means that they need to have an outright better record than the teams ahead of them. 9-8 will not make the playoffs in the AFC because there will likely be a 10-win team on the outside looking in. So, all of that getting totally away from the point. Texans Colts, I think is going to be a really really good game. Um, this is the next big challenge for the Texans. They certainly surpassed a big challenge in beating the Bills this last week. So let's see what they do on the road against the Colts this week. I think that's going to be a really really good game. C.J. Stroud currently questionable, so he may be coming back for this game. That'll be interesting as well. So I think that'll be a really really good one. 1 p.m. On CBS in the early window on Sunday should be a really really good game.
Sweet.
All
Jack,
right.
what prediction do you have loaded up? I'm curious. You have our sticky notes written down so far, and I'm sure you have a hot one loaded up here.
I've got them right here. I've got them right here. I'm still between a few, and so I need to think more. So I want to hear yours first, if you're ready.
Sure,
All
sure.
right,
So we discussed
2:24
earlier.
p.m. on 11:25. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah. So I was trying to find something that kind of fits the criteria of what we're looking for. A nice season long prediction that by the end of this season, we're able to cut it. It's more subjective as a prediction, but I think that it's pretty close as a hot take. I think that Christian McCaffrey is having the most underrated season as it's happening of all time. Christian McCaffrey right now is just a hair under 800 yards rushing and just a hair under 800 yards receiving. He is over 30 years old now, I believe. I believe he's at 30. And he is going to have his second 1,000 yard season, 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. At 30 years old, he's going to have done it twice after this season. He did it once in Carolina. He then had an incredible season in San Francisco. And I think that right now we're talking about Stafford's not throwing interceptions. He's leading the league in touchdowns. Jackson Smith and Jigba is incredible. Could he break 2,000 yards? Myles Garrett, is he going to break the sack record? Jonathan Taylor, he's scoring so many touchdowns. He's lapping the field for the running backs. But I think Christian McCaffrey right now is so incredibly underdiscussed that I think he's getting so criminally underrated for his production, specifically in the passing game. Having
Mm.
800 yards in the receiving game right now at this point in the season is unbelievable for a running back. And also to be doing it on the ground, I think is just unbelievable. And I haven't heard anybody talk about it for the second time potentially here down the stretch. Nobody's even come close to that before. Like Marshall Faulk did it once and then didn't do it again. He put up a lot of receiving yards and a lot of good seasons in his career, but never this kind of volume of production, especially for
Hmm.
an injured player like McCaffrey, who's had injury issues all throughout his career. To still be doing it here, I think he's so criminally underrated. I think if we look back, this might be the most underrated season of all time here.
Interesting. I can see that. I can appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of guys that are making a great case for offensive player of the year. You named some of them, Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith and Jigba, you mentioned Christian McCaffrey. George Pickens is having an incredible year, that's being slept on. Jahmyr Gibbs has really, over the last couple weeks, or last few weeks, he had 260 yards from scrimmage this last
Mhm.
week and 3 touchdowns. He's like making himself in the mix. I think the offensive player of the year uh, award is going to be very, very interesting this year. Um, as opposed to the defensive player of the year, which it feels like it's Myles Garrett's to lose right now, which I
Right.
think is really interesting because typically it's the other way around. Typically, you've got some running back that it's obvious they're the offensive player of the year, and then the defense, it's like, ooh, there are 3 edges plus a DB and a linebacker that had like 120 tackles on the year, like that makes it like, ooh, how's this going to play out? So I appreciate that. I like that. All right, here's what I'm going to go with. I have two. One of them involves the Chicago Bears, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want people that know I'm a Lions fan to think that I'm just a hater. And on top of that, um, I want instead of I keep having like the negative ones, like Kansas City will not make the playoffs. I want to have one that's more of a positive one where I'm rooting for a team instead of rooting against teams. Okay, and so
Mhm.
this is what it's going to be: the Arizona Cardinals, who right now are 3-8. They have 6 games remaining. They play the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Texans, the Falcons, the Bengals, and then the Rams again.
Mhm.
Arizona will win at least 3 more games. At least 3 more games. This is an Arizona team that I think is a lot better than their record shows. They just lost to the Jaguars in overtime on Sunday. Um, they beat the Cowboys, a few weeks ago. They
Mhm.
barely lost to the Packers, lost by 4 points to the Packers, lost by 4 points to the Colts, lost by a field goal to the Seahawks, lost by a point to the Niners. They they have a lot of close losses to really good teams. Um, so it seems like it wouldn't be that crazy to say that they'll beat the Falcons at home, and the Bengals on the road. The Bengals not doing that great, aren't very good. But Buccaneers, Rams, Texans, and Rams, the
Mhm.
Cardinals will win at least one of those games. The
Mhm.
Cardinals are going to make things very, very interesting in the playoff picture, not because they're going to be competing to get in, but because they're going to give a team that's in a surprising loss
Mhm.
that changes things. I mean, if the Cardinals beat the Rams in a couple weeks,
Mhm.
what then the Seahawks immediately then have life again, so yeah, so that's my prediction. Arizona wins at least 3 more games this year. It is 2:30 p.m. on 11/25,
Mhm.
and Arizona wins at least wins 3+ more games this season.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
I think that's a pretty good take, Jack. I think that you've got a really good shot here down the stretch with them playing teams like with the Cardinals playing team. Man, now I don't have the schedule in front of me. I'll just grab.
Cincinnati,
Yeah, Cincinnati, the Falcons. I think
right.
that especially this week against Tampa Bay for them, that Tampa Bay, if Teddy Bridgewater is playing, they have a good shot. Tampa Bay's kind of spiraling. Then you have a Bengals team that might just shut things down for the year, and then a Falcons team with Kirk Cousins. I think you have a really good shot there on those 3 games, and then I think you have a really good shot to win one of those other games too, where I think that divisional games against the Rams, stuff like that, and then you have a team like the Texans that's going to be fighting in a really clumped up end of that wild card area for the AFC. I think that you're 100% right that they have a really good shot to upset somebody here down the stretch. And I think that all of those combined with the Buccaneers team, that although it might not be a big marquee win if it's Teddy Bridgewater, that it's going to make the Buccaneers very upset because they really don't want to get into a dogfight with the Panthers and they really don't want to be being on that low point, especially at a point in their schedule where they thought it was going to be easy cruising. Tampa
Mm-hmm.
Bay's last month and a half of the season here was supposed to be easy for them. And then they
Yeah.
got smacked by the Rams, and then Baker Mayfield got hurt. And Baker Mayfield, when he hurts his shoulder, we've seen that before in Cleveland. We've seen it spiral for him before. And at least me, like I like this Buccaneers team and I really like Baker as a player. And I don't want to see a team like the Buccaneers start to spiral. So I really hope that the Buccaneers here are able to pull some stuff off. But I do think you have a really good shot here with this Cardinals prediction that they do have a really good chance here to win a number of these games down the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, like I think they're going to make some noise in the playoff conversation, not because they're going to play their way into it, but because they're going to throw a big wrench in the way of some of these other teams. That, the Rams really control their own destiny right now with, a favorable schedule ahead. For them, they play the Cardinals, twice. Let's look at. Let me pull it up here real quick. For the Rams, they play the Cardinals twice. They also play the Seahawks one more time. They play the Panthers. They play the Falcons, and they play the Lions at home. So they have to feel good about, a lot of these games, going through the rest of their schedule. And they're probably the ones they're worrying about are Detroit and, Seattle would be the ones to be concerned about. And so with that, playing the Cardinals the week before, that might be a game that sneaks up on them. If you just look at the records of the teams that they're playing, you know, the Cardinals are the worst team that they're going to play against. That said, even though the Falcons have a better record, I think that the Cardinals are a better team. I mean, we talked about it or I talked about their losses and their close losses to really good teams. So I think it's very well that, you know, the Rams might think, okay, hey, we just need to take care of, Detroit and take care of Seattle, and then we really control our own destiny. And then all of a sudden, Arizona upsets you the week before that, and now Seattle has life again. You aren't guaranteed the number one seed. You just brought Philadelphia back into it. Philadelphia has the tiebreaker over you with the win over you for the one seed. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, hold on. This is not just smooth sailing, moving ahead. And like you said, Tampa Bay not wanting to get into a rock fight with Carolina. If Arizona wins this week, then Tampa Bay and Carolina have the same record. And of course, Houston also not a team to be trifled with either. So I think it'll be interesting. I wanted to have one where I need to root for something instead of against
Yeah,
something. So
yeah,
so I went with it. Um,
yeah.
so yeah,
I have a question for you, Jack, just to like wrap up here. Like it is a pretty big picture question, but we've been
sure.
talking about the playoff picture. We've got over a month left in the season, but it's starting to get to the point where the playoff picture it's getting solidified. We know what teams are clear out of it. We know
Hmm.
what teams we think are clear into it. But that gray area, we're starting to get a good look at that. AFC, the Texans have been on a hot streak. The Steelers have beat good teams. The Chiefs obviously are a very established team. They're the 8, 9, 10 outside of the playoffs. And then in the NFC, you have a Lions team that we think is a pretty darn good team, a Panthers team that's been sneaky, really impressive, and then a Cowboys team that they've put on some good showings here and I think have some really, really good points here. Those are the 8, 9, and 10, three spots outside of the playoffs. Do you think here with in the next couple of years, we're going to see the commissioner in the league talking about, hey, let's expand to an 18th game here. Let's try and have more games on the schedule. Do we feel like we got that seventh seed in the AFC and NFC for a 7 team in each side playoff bracket? Do we feel like that it's time to adjust that again? And with teams being as good as they are, as deep as the league is, do we feel like should we go back to 6 teams per conference? Should we stay at 7? Are you feeling like it would make more sense for an 8th? Because if a team like the Lions or the Chiefs gets left out of this, with how good we think those teams are, I feel like it would be like a 3-loss Alabama being left out of the playoffs in a random year with college football now. where you and I can eye test and be like, Alabama's really good. But obviously, teams get losses, teams play other good teams, and it happens. Are we feeling okay about a good team or multiple good teams here being left out of the NFL playoffs here down the stretch?
Absolutely. I have no qualms with it because it's not a committee that is comparing apples to oranges to bananas to grapes and trying to come up with something. It is we have a way that we can stack everybody up against each other. I mean, not everyone plays the same schedule, right? It's not like everyone in the NFC North is playing all of the exact same teams, but they play a majority of the exact same teams, including playing against each other multiple times, stuff like that. Listen, you got to win games, right? Like, this is not an invitational tournament. You have to win, you have to earn your way in. And, I know as a Lions fan, like, if they don't make it, I'm not going to be like, well, they're good enough. I wish there was another spot. I'm going to be like, well, you should have beaten the Vikings at home instead of losing to them by a field goal. You shouldn't have dropped that game early to the Packers, right? You should have been more prepared for that. You shouldn't have gone 0 for 5 on fourth down in Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football. Like, that's those are the things that you're going to be saying. This is not an invitational. This is not, subjective. It is completely objective in terms of you need to have a good enough record. Um, I think the expansion to 7 games, or 7 teams, excuse me, was the right call because the one seed deserves to have that much of a reward for doing that, and being the only bye instead of in the old 16 playoffs, both 1 and 2 got the bye. Yes, one had home field advantage, but still. um so I do think that that was the right move, but I don't think you need to or should go more than that, because at that point we're letting 50% of the teams in the NFL into the playoffs. And because the NFL is a anybody can win any Sunday. I don't want to see, and it would be interesting. Like, sure, this year we're going to look at it, and there's going to be teams that are in that 8 spot that are like, man, they're actually good and actually competitive. But in the past, there have been teams that, like, I mean, I've like, no, not to, rake your Steelers over the coals, but like, there have been years that the 9-8 Steelers have barely crawled their way over the finish line into the playoffs. And if they're the last team in, who's the team that's behind them? And that's a very, like, legitimate, legitimate argument of like, okay, I don't want, even though you run the simulations, 10,000 times, 9,000 of those times, the Chiefs beat the Dolphins in the first round of the playoffs. I don't want to see the 8 and 9 Dolphins get in and then, shock the world and win that game, because there's a difference between this team has played well enough to earn their way in to give themselves a chance, and we're letting lots of people in, and like, and then that craziness happens, like in college basketball, right? It's a 68 team tournament. You have all these teams that no one's heard of that get in, and everyone's like, oh, can you believe that they got in instead of this team? North Carolina doesn't get in, right? But Richmond does. And it's like, well, Richmond won their conference, right? They won their conference. They were the best team in their conference, and that's how they earned the right in. There have been lots of times, especially in recent history with the NFC East and the NFC South, that a team has been in and hosted a playoff game that has had a worse record than all of the wild card teams, and a team that does not make the playoffs. But they earned their way in by winning their division. Okay? So if teams are earning their way in by winning something that has always been the standard, that's one thing. But just going, oh shoot, it's a shame this team didn't get in, let's add a playoff spot the next time, is just going to lead to a point that we have a team with a losing record not win a division and get in the playoffs. And I just don't think I don't think that looks good. I don't think that's good for the sport. I think if anything, that just adds a game to the playoffs that teams already will not want to play. It just adds a game then that the one seed, which then if we do 8 teams, I don't know how you do it that the one seed gets an advantage if you do 8. They'll have to play the 8 seed, and then you're having a team like the 14-3 Rams playing the 8-9 Vikings or something, and you risk Matthew Stafford getting hurt for a game that really shouldn't even happen. So no, I am not about expanding the playoffs. I think where it is right now is perfect. Because also there's still that really fun allure of like, okay, there are 3 wild card spots. Which division is going to be the first to get all 4 of their teams in the playoffs? Which is a fun thing to think about. Well, there are 5 wildcard spots, then that's not really that big of a deal, then, is it?
Sure.
So anyway, that's my thought. I don't know, maybe maybe you completely disagree, but that's where I am on it.
No, you were succinct with it. I was just curious because I think that the NFL right now is so deep. I think there are so many teams that are really good that I
For
think
sure.
can win a bunch of these games here down the stretch that it's going to be close. And I remember back 2008, the 2008 Patriots, you have Matt Castle in at quarterback. Tom Brady tears his ACL, his knee gets obliterated. And that was coming off of the 16-0 season. They lost the Super Bowl. And that Patriots team was 11-5, and they missed the playoffs at 11-5, and they were that 7th seed. If we get a team like in the next couple of years, if we have a 10-win team miss the playoffs, like I think we'll be like, wow, that's crazy. If we get an 11-win team miss the playoffs, that's going to be nuts, man. Like, I just think that right now the playoff picture, like you said, is really well constructed. But I
Mhm.
think great teams that are playing great at the end of the season that have really good records not making the playoffs just is a really weird optic. If the Chiefs somehow win the rest of their games and don't make the playoffs and they're an 11-win team or whatever, I think that that's going to be crazy to look at and be like, so how did Patrick Mahomes' first season look that he didn't make the playoffs? Well, they still won 11 games and they were like really good, but they had really bad luck in one-score games or didn't play well in some of these spots. But they still won 11 games, and it's like, wow, it would just be such an interesting place to be at. And I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, the season's unfolding in a certain way that we still don't know how it's going to end up at the end of the line here. But
Right.
I'm really curious if one of these really good teams not gets left out, but if we just have so many really quality teams, because the NFL is a really great league that's got a bunch of competitive football teams. If a good team misses out, how are we going to feel? And I think you were
Right.
really with it, talking about it with college and rankings and subjectivity. But here it's objective, like you're saying. And they just got to win more games. If the Chiefs don't make it in and they win a bunch of games, you should have beat Jacksonville. You should have beat the Broncos. And you're right about that.
Yeah. Because it's the same thing about like, oh man, well, we didn't win the division. Like, we lost the division by 1 game. It's like, yeah, and you played 6 division games. Like,
Mm,
so if I think they're whole other story. I think there is a world where Chicago, even though right now they are winning the division, I think there's a world where they not only don't win the division, but they don't win the playoffs. And you know
mm,
why that'll happen? Because they still have to play the Lions once and the Packers twice. And that'll happen. They will not make the playoffs by losing those games. They also play the Eagles, they play the 49ers on the road, right? They have a tough schedule ahead. They have the Browns, and their other 5 games are against current playoff teams, except the Lions, who are just barely on the outside looking in.
mm,
So there's a world where that Bears team doesn't just lose the division, but doesn't make the playoffs. You know what no one is going to be doing? Throwing a pity party saying, oh man, well, they deserve to be in. No, they didn't. Right now, their strength of victory is 309, which is
mm.
not good. And it means that you didn't win the games against the good teams that are going to be there in the tournament anyway. So, like, no, we're not throwing a pity party. No, we're not finding another way to get the Chicago Bears in starting next year. It doesn't matter because you should have won games if you wanted to get in, which is something that, as much as I love college football, honestly, I prefer college football over the NFL. I find it way more Invigorating and exciting and all of that. Um, like the way the college football playoff expansion has happened, because it's like, oh shoot, we had good teams that didn't get into the playoffs, let's expand it,
Mhm. Mhm.
has not been good for the sport. It's been worse for the sport, because that's how we've had the conference realignment, happen. It's how we've had, all of these, teams that just barely miss the playoff, and then like, okay, well then bowl games don't matter because, you know, 20 of their 22 starters have already decided they're not playing and they're going in the portal or whatever, and all of that, which is not good. Um, but compared to the NFL, we're not changing the rules because there was a team that pulls a lot of eyes that doesn't get in, right? Like when the Packers didn't make the playoffs the year that the Lions knocked him out, Aaron Rodgers last year, even though the Packers are one of the biggest brands in the NFL and would have gotten so many eyes, so many more eyes watching the NFL for the playoffs, the NFL didn't go like, well, shoot, we got to figure out a way so that in that situation in the future the Packers can get in. Unlike the college football playoff, it feels like has done with teams like Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame. So no, the NFL playoff is exactly where it should be. Again, I at first I was like, man, we're adding a seventh, but actually I do think that it makes things more exciting. I like that it gives way more advantage to the number one seed, because you do deserve it, right? Like, it would, even though last year, the Lions lost their one playoff game, still it's like it would suck if the only difference between the 15 and 2 Lions and like the 13 and 4 Eagles, is okay, well, if the Lions play the Eagles, they'll play them at home, right? That because that's just an if. The only advantage then is an if. If you play the other team, that has the really good record, you're going to play them at home. So I do like that the one seed has way more value now. There's way more competition for that. It's way less of like because we used to see in the 16 playoff, like, you know teams like, we're locked, we're not going to do worse than the two, maybe we can get the one, but we need to win and then we need them to lose, and we look at who they're playing and it's like they're not going to lose, you know what, let's just rest our guys too, like, which is like, okay, well, that sucks. We want football to be competitive, right? So I definitely think that, but we do not need to go anywhere farther than where we are right now.
Mhm. Gotcha, gotcha.
All right, everybody. Well, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, 3 games this week. The Bengals Ravens is the nightcap, which honestly will probably be the worst of the 3 games. It used to always be that the first game was the Lions because that was always going to be the worst game. But but Lions Packers actually is going to be a pretty good game. It opens with Detroit as a 2.5 point favorite, which, as we've talked about in the past, basically just means the Lions have the advantage because they're playing in Detroit. Um,
Mhm.
the Chiefs are a 3 point favorite over the Cowboys right now, and the Ravens are a full 7 point favorite over the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, so enjoy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And enjoy the games this week. There are a lot of exciting ones and intriguing ones all throughout the weekend. That Bears Eagles game is a Black Friday game. Um, so there's a lot of fun football to enjoy, both college and pros. And we will be back next week to recap the NFL week. As once we get past Thanksgiving, it is really crunch time for those playoffs. So we will be there to examine what's happening there, as well as to examine what the college football playoff landscape looks like going into conference championship week. It's going to be a good time. We're going to keep you completely covered with all of it. And until then, have a great week, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.